The Mycenaean, called Mycelium 72, was very friendly and served as their guide. They came to a semicircular seat of white stonite, which sparkled in the light, as did the sacratorium. Harry asked him if tribespeople could enter the sacratorium as spectators. Mycelium 72 shook his head vigorously. Never. It's for the sons of the dawn only. Daughters of the dawn enter only on certain days. When I was young, my parents took me, but it was just people reading from the book and weeping for the old days. Your mind has to be totally on the lost world. It's not for me. I'm a scholar, and I want the whole world open to me. Good, said Selden. We feel that way, too. We are scholars, and we have read the great works of your people. I've read about the lost world, and I've read about robots. That is why I would like to be able to enter the sacratorium. I would like to see the robot. Doors kicked lightly at Selden's ankle, but he ignored her. I don't believe in such nonsense, protested Mycelium 72. Selden persisted. Where would it be if it was in the sacratorium? Might there not be a hidden place, a special place? Mycelium 72 said uneasily, There's the Elder's Eyrie, but there's nothing up there, and I wouldn't advise you to try to get up into it. I don't think you would like what would happen if they found a tribesman inside. Well, best of the dawn to you, and he rose suddenly and hurried away. Selden looked after him, rather surprised. What made him rush off like that? I think, said Dors, it's because someone is approaching. And someone was. A tall man in an elaborate white gown, crossed by a glittering red sash. Harry rose as the new Mycenaean approached. Dors Venabili rose also and carefully kept her eyes lowered. The other stood before them. He, too, was an old man, but more subtly aged than Mycelium 72. His bald head was beautifully round, and his eyes were a startling blue, contrasting sharply with the bright, all but glowing red of his sash. I am Skystrip 2, he said with authority, an elder of the sacratorium. And your position, tribesman? We, said Selden, are scholars of Streeling University. We are here to study the ways of Mycenae. By whose authority? Asked the elder. By that of Sunmaster 14, who greeted us on our arrival. Skystrip 2 fell silent for a moment, and then a small smile appeared on his face. The High Elder, I know him well. What is your interest in the sacratorium? The robot, said Selden. The elder stared at Selden in shocked surprise. Then, bending to bring his lips close to Selden's ear, he said, Leave now, or I will raise the cry of invasion. Were it not for the High Elder, I would not give you even this one chance to leave. And Dors, with surprising strength, nearly pulled Selden off his feet as she stepped hastily away, dragging him along with her. It was over breakfast the next morning, not sooner, that Dors took up the subject, and in a way that Selden found most wounding. We were driven out, she said. And for what? What did we gain? Only the knowledge that there is a robot in there. Despite what Mycelium 72 said, the elder would not have reacted the way he did if there were no robot inside. Selden was determined to try to get in. After breakfast, he and Dors went to buy a red sash. His plan was to go to the Sacratorium Annex Library, where the old Mycenaean had told them all the tribespeople data were kept. From this library, he hoped to find the entrance to the Sacratorium. Mycelium 72 said not to try to get up into the Elder's Eyrie. Up. It must be somewhere in that central tower of the Sacratorium. If I can find a living robot that's 20,000 years old, and if it can tell me— Dors interrupted him. She insisted upon going with him. Since women were not allowed, she would pass for a man, wearing a white rather than a gray gown. You can't see my breasts under it, she said, and I have the same smooth, unmarked face a man has. All I need is a white gown and a red sash. In fact, any sister could do it. Harry objected, but Dors stood firm, and that was that. Robot, according to the Encyclopedia Galactica, a term used in the ancient legends of several worlds for what are usually called automata. Robots are described as generally human in shape and made of metal, although some are supposed to have been pseudo-organic in nature. Harry Selden, in the course of that period called The Flight, is popularly supposed to have seen an actual robot, but the story is of dubious origin. They were not noticed. Harry and Doors repeated the trip of the day before, and this time no one gave them a second look. Harry pointed out the library. "Take a deep breath," he said in a low voice. "This is the first hurdle." The door ahead was open, the light within subdued. There were 5 broad stone steps leading upward. Together they walked up the stairs, then through a door, where at a desk immediately inside was a man bent over the simplest and clumsiest computer Selden had ever seen. "Scholars?" the man asked. "Scholars," answered Selden. The man jerked his head toward the door. "Go in. Enjoy." They moved inward, and, as nearly as they could see, they were the only ones in this section of the library. Selden pointed to a discreet sign above a freestanding set of shelves. It glowed with the letters, "To the Sacratorium." He looked about. "Let's step out of eyeshot of the man at the door and put on our sashes." They did so. Then Selden touched the entrance panel, and a portal slid open. Together, almost in unison, they walked through. They were in a large room, seeming all the larger because it was empty of anything resembling furniture. Periodically, there were small, two-dimensional television screens, all of which were operating. From where Doors and Selden stood, there was not even the illusion of a third dimension, not a breath of true holovision. There were people present, not many, and nowhere together. For the most part, there was silence. Selden leaned toward Doors, who instantly put a finger to her lips, then pointed to one of the television monitors. The screen showed an idyllic garden bursting with blooms, the camera panning over it slowly. A soft voice explained that the garden had been reproduced from an ancient guidebook and photographs. "Someone may start wailing at any moment," Doors whispered. "They're mourning their lost world." "Wait," said Selden. "Come this way." Doors frowned, following him to another screen. "Robots here," he said under cover of the sound as it came on. The picture showed a line of hedges in the foreground, and 3 of what could only be described as robots. They were apparently metallic and vaguely human in shape. "They are what I would expect automata to be," said Harry. "I want to see the organic ones, the humanoids. We must find the Elder's Eyrie." They paced along the wall, passing from screen to screen, until Doors clutched Selden's arm. Between 2 screens were lines marking a faint rectangle. "A door," she said. Selden looked about surreptitiously. "How would it open?" he asked. There was no entrance badge. "It's just not marked," said Doors. Then she noticed a slight discoloration on the wall. "How many palms?" she asked. "How many times?" Selden held his breath. He touched the discolored spot to no avail, and then placed his palm full upon it and pressed. The door opened silently. Selden stepped through rapidly, and Doors followed him as the door closed behind them. The rather narrow room they had entered was somewhat dark, but as they stepped further into it, the light brightened. Doors looked about. "There is no robot." "This isn't the Eyrie," Selden said. "We have to go up." "That must be the way." He pointed to a carpeted stairway. Together they stepped toward the staircase and began the climb. They went up 3 flights. At the top of the 3rd flight, the stairs ended, and before them was another door. "And if it's locked," said Selden, "do we break it down?" Doors urged him to turn back, but Selden strode forward and pushed against the entry panel. The door retracted with silent speed, and Selden took a step back at the surprising flood of light from within. And there, facing him, eyes alive with light, arms half upraised, 1 foot slightly advanced, gleaming with a faintly metallic shine, was a human figure. "It's the robot," said Selden in awe. "But it's metallic." "Worse than that," said Doors, who had stepped quickly to one side and then to the other. "Its eyes don't follow me. It's not alive, if one can speak of robots as being alive." And a man, unmistakably a man, stepped out from behind the robot and said, "Perhaps not, but I am alive." Almost automatically, Doris stepped forward and took her place between Selden and the man who had suddenly appeared. Selden pushed her to one side. "I don't need protection. This is our old friend, Sunmaster 14. "And you are Tribesman Selden," said Sunmaster. "And this, despite her masculine dress, is Tribeswoman Venabile. You are right, Tribesman. You are in no danger of physical harm from me. But why are you here?" "To see the robot," said Selden. "Do you know, Tribesman Selden, that no one but an elder is allowed in the Eyrie? That no tribesperson is allowed in the Sacratorium? That no woman is allowed in except on certain stated occasions, and that no woman at any time is allowed to dress in masculine garb? Yes, then I must ask, why do you want to see the robot?" "Our purpose is knowledge," said Selden. "Tribeswoman Venabile is a historian, and I too have an interest in history. Why should we not be interested in Mycogenian history?" "For one thing, because we do not wish you to be," said Sunmaster. "We arranged for Raindrop 43 to show you our microfarms. She complied at considerable cost to her peace of mind, and eventually you asked for the book. To have handed it over too easily might have roused your suspicion, so she pretended to a perverse desire only you could satisfy. Her self-sacrifice will not be forgotten. May I have the book?" And Selden handed it over. Sunmaster 14 sighed. "Once you had this book, we were not surprised when you made your way to the Sacratorium. You were watched at all times. The elderly brother you met told you about the library and the Sacratorium, but he was also careful to tell you what you were forbidden to do, for we did not wish to entrap you. Skystrip 2 also warned you, and yet you came up here. And I ask you again, why?" Doors answered this time. "We will tell you yet once again, Mycogenian. We are scholars. It is only knowledge that we seek. What harm have we done? We have in no way disturbed the building, this room, or you, or that." She pointed to the robot. Sunmaster 14 addressed Selden. "This robot is a symbol of all we have lost, and all to which we intend some day to return." "But," said Selden, "we are members of societies that are not tied to an ancient past. We realize what it may mean to you, but to us it is a dead lump of metal. And now," said Doors, "we will leave." "You will not," said Sunmaster 14. "By coming here, you have committed a crime." His lips curved in a wintry smile. "Let us remain reasonable," said Selden. "You may be the law in Mycogen over local affairs, but you are not the law over us, and you know it." Sunmaster 14 was not swayed. "Tribesman Hammond brought you here as fugitives, and we Mycogenians strongly suspect that you are running from the Emperor. Why should the Emperor object if we do his work for him?" "Because," said Selden, "even if we were fugitives from Imperial authorities, your killing us, for whatever reason, without due Imperial process would be to defy the Emperor's authority. No Emperor could allow such a precedent. Do you wish in your eagerness to be rid of us, to have Imperial soldiery loot your farms and dwellings, desecrate your Sacratorium, and take liberties with the sisters? Consider." Sunmaster 14 smiled once again. "Actually, I have considered, and there is an alternative. After we condemn you, we could delay your execution to allow you to appeal to the Emperor for a review of your case." Selden and Doors looked at each other briefly, and were silent. "Actually," said a new voice, "I think neither alternative is acceptable, and we must search for a third." Doors spoke first. "Hammond, thank goodness you found us. I got in touch with you the moment I realized I was not going to deflect Harry from—" She held up her hands in a wide gesture. "This." Hammond's smile was a small one. "My dear, I was engaged in other things. I cannot always pull away at a moment's notice." Sunmaster 14 had recovered from what seemed to be a painful shock. "How did you get in here, Tribesman Hammond?" "It was not easy, High Elder, but as Tribeswoman Venabile likes to say, I'm a very persuasive person. Some of the citizens here remember who I was and what I have done for Mycogen in the past, that I'm even an honorary brother. Have you forgotten, Sunmaster 14? "I have not forgotten," replied the elder. "We will make it up to you some other way, but these two must die or be handed over to the Emperor." "Let me make you an offer," said Hammond. Have these two told you they are scholars? The elder nodded. Hammond went on. They're not lying. The tribeswoman is a historian, and the tribesman is a mathematician. Together, they're trying to combine their talents to make a mathematics of history, and they call the combined subject psychohistory. It took Hammond some 15 minutes speaking concisely to describe the possible science of anticipating the future with a substantial degree of probability. Yet when Hammond finished, Sun Master 14 called it an unlikely speculation. Possibly, High Elder, said Hammond, but the Emperor doesn't think so. And by the Emperor, I really mean Ito de Merzel, as you know. They would like very much to have these two scholars, which is why I brought them here for safekeeping. No real harm has been done, but imagine what harm will be done if psychohistory falls into the hands of de Merzel. I grant that nothing may come of this theory, but suppose for a moment that something does, and that the imperial government has use of it. How long do you think your rule as High Elder will last, with men like de Merzel adjusting the future to their liking? This is still flimsy speculation, said Sun Master 14. Think, Hammond said, these scholars, if left alone, might even be able to arrange a future that restores your lost world. And though the chance of developing psychohistory may be small, it is not zero. And if it will help to restore the lost world, what can you want more than that? And Sun Master 14 nodded his head. You are very persuasive, and you are right. Take these two out of Mysogen and never let me see them again, unless there comes a time. But surely it will not be in my lifetime. Perhaps not, said Hammond, but your people have been waiting patiently for nearly 20,000 years. Would you then object to waiting another, perhaps, 200? And standing up, Sun Master 14 said, I will clear the path. Take them and go. They were back in a tunnel, going from Mysogen to... Selden did not know where. He hesitated to ask. Hammond did not seem to welcome conversation. He sat in the front of the four-seater while Selden and Dors shared the back seat. It was Dors who finally asked, Cheddar, why don't you tell us where we're going? Somewhere, answered Hammond, where it may be difficult for you to get into trouble, although I'm not sure such a place exists. Selden spoke up. The thing is, Hammond, I had the idea that there were humaniform robots, that they were long-lived, that at least one might still be alive, and that it might be in the Sacratorium. Where did you get your information about humaniform robots? Asked Hammond. Selden admitted that he had gotten a copy of the book. They speak of humaniform robots that could not be distinguished from human beings in appearance. There may have been only a handful, but one of them the book refers to as renegade. It seems to have an unpleasant significance, but I couldn't make out what. It's not a proper name, commented Dors. It's an archaic word that means, roughly, what traitor would mean in Galactic. Selden said, there was another point that the book made. It seemed to say that the renegade could somehow tap human emotions, influence them. Any politician can, observed Hammond with a shrug. Well, said Selden, I would give a great deal to find an ancient humaniform robot that I could question about the Galactic Society when it consisted of only a handful of worlds. From so small a galaxy, psychohistory could be deduced more easily. Hammond said, are you sure you could trust what you heard? After many thousands of years, what a robot remembers best may be what you wish him to remember least. Selden was in despair. Wherever I turn, working out psychohistory looks impossible. But, Hammond answered, a route may be found that none of us would at this moment expect. Give yourself more time. And Selden sighed and said, well, I'll try. But I'm out of hope. Possible, but not practical, I said to begin with, and I am more convinced of that now than I ever was before. Hugo Amaral, according to the Encyclopaedia Galactica, was a mathematician who, next to Harry Selden himself, may be considered most responsible for working out the details of psychohistory. Born into the hopeless poverty of the lower classes of Dal, a sector of ancient Trantor, he might have passed his life in utter obscurity were it not for the fact that Selden, quite by accident, encountered him. Gerard de Salver of the Dal sector was short. The top of his head came up only to Harry Selden's nose. He sprouted a thick black mustache and curly black hair. He lived with his wife and a half-grown daughter in an apartment of 7 small rooms. Hamann had arranged the doll sector as sanctuary because it was poor and unremarkable, and unlikely to attract the attention of the Emperor and de Merzel. He said to Harry and Doris, "Try not to get into trouble, and try not to get your host family in trouble either." De Salver, at least, did not seem to anticipate trouble of any kind, and his pleasure at the company he now had, quite apart from the rent credits he would be getting, seemed sincere. He had never been outside Dal, and his appetite for tales of distant places was enormous. After dinner, when the entire family was assembled, Selden and Doris were expected to talk of the outside world. They asked Harry about Helicon, but he demurred. "It's just a world like any other," he said. "Only Trantor is different from all the rest." The sentence echoed in Harry's mind. For a moment, he grasped it, and for some reason thought of Dora's hand-on-thigh story. But it was a fleeting thought. After 3 evenings of questioning, Selden found himself tiring. That evening he said to Tessalver, "You know, Master Tessalver, you've never told me the nature of your work." "Me?" Tessalver placed his fingers on his chest, which was covered by the simple white T-shirt that was the standard male uniform in Dal. "I work at the local holovision station in programming. It's very dull." "But it's respectable," said Mistress Tessalver. "It means he doesn't have to work in the heat sinks." The heat sinks, explained Tessalver, were what Dal was best known for. They supplied half of all Trantor's energy. When Doors expressed interest in the heat sinks, Tessalver offered a tour the next day. His wife, however, looked down on this. "It's no place for a decent woman," she said. It was early evening when they set out for their tour, and there was an attractive twilight glow above. Master Tessalver hurried his guests onto an elevator. "It's a busy world on the lower levels," he explained. When the elevator came to a halt, they stepped out into a blast of heat. A short, dark, young executive introduced himself as Hanno Linder. He offered to show them around, but warned that it would not be comfortable. He took a deep breath and said, "Okay, out into the soup." At first, Selden was aware only of computers and machinery, huge pipes, flickering lights, and flashing screens. The overall light was comparatively dim, though individual sections of machinery were illuminated. They were approaching a congregation of people now, about 12 men and women. Hanno Linder held up his arms. "Heat sinkers, we have 2 visitors from outside, 2 outworlders, 2 scholars. They've got worlds running short on energy, and they've come to see how we do it here on Dal. They think they may learn something." "They'll learn how to sweat," shouted a heat sinker, and there was raucous laughter. But one young man stepped forward, staring at Selden with intense, deep-set eyes, his face a humorless mask. "I know you," he said. "You're the mathematician." Automatically, Doris stepped in front of Selden, and Lindor stepped in front of her, shouting, "Back, heat sinker. You smell. Mind your manners." "Wait, let him talk to me," said Selden. He asked the young heat sinker what he wanted. "My name is Amaro, Hugo Amaro. I've seen you on Holovision. You talked about something called psychohistory. I want to talk to you, just for a little while." Selden turned to Tessalver. "Would you permit me to see him in your house?" "Oh, it's not me, Master Selden. It's my wife. She won't stand for a heat sinker in the house." "I'll talk to her," said Selden. "She'll have to." Cecilia Tessalver opened her eyes wide. "A heat sinker? Not in my apartment." "Why not?" said Selden. "Besides, he'll be coming to my room." "I won't have it," said Mistress Tessalver. "There's neighbors to think of. A sweaty, smelly heat sinker." Doris interrupted. "Since Dr. Selden must see him, we'll have to go elsewhere. So we will pay the rent through today and leave. And of course we will have to explain to Master Hammond why we have had to change the arrangements he so kindly made for us." Mistress Tessalver's face became a study of calculation. Thinking of Hammond's credit tiles, Cecilia Tessalver relented and nodded her head in agreement. Hugo Amaral arrived a few minutes before 1400, looking about warily. His hair was neat, and his thick mustache was combed and turned up slightly at the edges. His T-shirt was startlingly white, and he carried a bag. Selden and Doris ushered him rapidly through the apartment and into Selden's room. "Dr. Selden," said Amaral, "I wanted to see you because You see, I want to become a mathematician, too. What's stopping me is I'm a Dahlite, a heat sinker on Dahl. I don't have the money to get an education. But I taught myself. I liked number theory, and I came up with some new things. I've brought some of them. He handed Selden the bag he was carrying. For a long time, Selden studied Amaril's papers. The work was naive in the extreme, but he allowed no smile to cross his face. When he looked up, he informed Amaril that his theorem had been worked out over 300 years ago. The young man looked stricken. "You did it more cleverly, though," said Selden. "You have talent. I'm sure my friend here, Mr. Svenabile, can get you into Streeling University on scholarship. You'll have to start at the beginning, but by now Amaril had caught his breath. Into Streeling? They won't take me. They won't take people from Dahl. They don't like us. They say we smell. They say we're dirty. They say we steal." "Why do they say all this?" asked Selden. "Because it's easy to say it," said Amaril, "and it makes them feel good. Sure, if we work in the heat sinks, we get dirty and smelly. If we're poor and held down, some of us steal. But that isn't the way with all of us. Master Selden, I've got to get away. I have no chance on Trantor." Selden moistened his lips. "I won't forget you. I'll see to it that you get off Trantor and into my own university in Helicon, once I'm back there myself." "Your word of honor?" asked Amaril, "even though I'm a Dahlite?" "The fact that you're a Dahlite is unimportant to me. I find it impossible to believe that there would be such unreasoning feeling against harmless people." "That's because it doesn't affect you." "Mr. Amaril," said Doris, "Dr. Selden is a mathematician like you, and his head can sometimes be in the clouds. I know that it isn't unusual for one group of people to look down on another group. It's too bad. Saying something is too bad is easy, Mr. Svenabile. It's a lot worse than too bad. It's against everything decent and natural. We're all of us the same, yellow hairs and black hairs, tall and short, Easterners, Westerners, and Outworlders. We're all of us, you and I, even the Emperor, descended from the people of Earth, aren't we?" Selden looked at Doris, his eyes wide. "Descended from what?" "From the people of Earth," shouted Amaril. "The one planet on which human beings originated." "Just one planet? When you say Earth, you mean Aurora, don't you?" "Aurora," said Amaril. "What's that?" "I mean Earth. Have you never heard of Earth?" Selden sighed. "I've heard all this before. Well, let's go through it again. Young man, where did you hear about Earth?" "My dad told me," said Amaril. "Everyone knows about it. If you want stories about it, there's Mother Rita. She's an old woman. She lives in Billybotten, or used to." "How do I get there?" asked Selden. "Believe me, you don't want to get there." "But I'd like to see Mother Rita." Amaril shook his head. "Can you use a knife? You'll need one. Otherwise you'll never get out of Billybotten alive." "Anyway, are you really serious, Master Selden, about helping me get to Helicon?" "Entirely serious," replied Harry. "Write down your name and a code where I can reach you by hypercomputer." "Well then," said Amaril, looking earnestly at Selden, "this means I have my whole future riding on you, Master Selden. So please, don't go to Billybotten. I can't afford to lose you now." When Amaril was gone, Harry told Doris, "I'm curious about Amaril's reference to Earth." "It's just a legend," Doris said, "and a routine one. The names differ from planet to planet, but the content is the same. There is always the tale of an original world and a golden age." "For some reason," said Selden, "the idea of one world keeps reminding me of your hand-on-thigh story. I have the feeling I must find out more about it at any cost. That and robots." "Robots, too? I thought the Elders Airy put an end to that." "Harry, let me tell you one thing. In scholarly history, and believe me, I know what I'm talking about, there is no mention of one world of origin. All the more reason, Doris, to go beyond scholarly history. All I want is advice that will simplify psychohistory for me. I really would like to find this Mother Rita, and I'm prepared to go alone." "Never," snapped Doris. "If you go, I go." Harry and Doris took the expressway to the Billy Bottom stop. It was early afternoon, and at first glance, it seemed much like the part of Dal they had left. The air, however, had a pungent aroma, and the walkway was littered with trash. The atmosphere was uncomfortable, and as tense as a too tightly coiled spring. Perhaps it was the people. Every person who passed, moving in either direction, turned to stare at Selden and Doris. Every pair of eyes followed them with ill will. A boy, who looked to be about 12, had come to a full halt and was staring at them. His face was smudged, but his eyes were bright, sharp. "We're trying to find Mother Rita," Selden said. The boy approached 2 steps closer. His eyes flickered. "You want your fortune? You come to Billy Bottom, guy, with your fancy clothes? I can tell your fortune. All bad." They managed to find out that the boy's name was Rach. He finally offered to take them to Mother Rita if Doris would give him one of the knives she carried on her belt. Selden objected. "Those are grown people's knives, Rach. You're too young." "Then I guess I'm too young to know where Mother Rita lives." Selden grew uneasy. It was possible they might attract a crowd. He asked Rach, "Can you read?" "Nah." "Can you use a computer?" "A talking computer," said Rach. "Sure, anyone can." Selden offered to buy Rach a computer and teach him how to read if he would take them to Mother Rita. Rach agreed. When they'd bought the computer, the boy reached for it, but Selden put it in his pouch and said, "You've got to get me to Mother Rita first." "You better give it to me then," said Rach. He turned and led them quickly along the walkway past curious stairs. They followed him into an apartment complex, and Selden, who meant to retrace his steps later, was quickly lost. Rach knew his way, though, and they wandered through alleys deeper into the complex. Hanging over it all was an air of total decay, inhabitants slinking past in clear resentment of the outsider's invasion. And finally, Rach stopped before a dark, scarred door on which the number 2782 glowed feebly. "This is it," he said. Selden pushed the signal button, but nothing happened. "It don't work," said Rach. "You gotta bang, loud. She don't hear so good." Selden pounded his fist on the door and was rewarded with the sound of movement inside. A shrill voice called out, "Who wants Mother Rita?" Selden shouted, "2 scholars." He tossed the small computer to Rach, who snatched it, grinned, and ran off. Selden then turned to face the opening door and Mother Rita. Mother Rita was well into her 70s, but had the kind of face that, at first glance, seemed to belie that. Plump cheeks, a little mouth, a small round chin, slightly doubled. She was very short, and she moved with difficulty. Come in," she said, and peered at them as though her eyesight were beginning to fail. "Outsiders, outworlders even, am I right? You don't seem to have the smell of Trantor about you." "You are right, Mother Rita. I am Harry Selden of Helicon, and my friend is Doris Venabili of Cinna." "So," she said, "you have come to learn the future from old Mother Rita." "Not quite," said Selden. "I have come to learn the past." "Excellent," said Mother. "But I earn my fees." "We will pay any reasonable fee," said Selden, "if you tell us about Earth. We wish to hear the truth." The old woman, who had been shuffling about the room, stopped short. "What do you want to know about Earth?" "What is it, to begin with?" asked Selden. She turned and seemed to gaze off into space. "It is a world, very old planet. It existed in the dawn of the galaxy and before the dawn. It was the only world with humanity." Was another name for Earth Aurora? And now Mother Rita's face twisted with a frown. "Where did you hear that?" "In my wanderings," said Selden. "I have heard of an old, forgotten world named Aurora, on which humanity lived in primordial peace." "It's a lie! That name must never be mentioned except as the place of evil. It was the beginning of evil. Evil nearly destroyed Earth, but Earth rallied and destroyed evil with the help of heroes like the great Baali." "Earth was before this evil?" asked Selden. "Millions of years," she answered. "But how do you know all this, Mother Rita?" The old woman shook her head. "I heard the old stories from my mother, who heard it from hers, and so on far back." Selden asked, "Have you ever heard of robots?" The old woman shuddered.
Why do you ask such things? Those were artificial human beings, evil in themselves, the work of evil worlds. They were destroyed and should never be mentioned.
There was one special robot, wasn't there, that the evil worlds hated? Mother Rita tottered toward Selden and peered into his eyes. He could feel her hot breath on his face.
There was an artificial human being who helped Earth. He was Dani, friend of Bali. He never died, and lives somewhere, waiting for his time to return. No one knows when that will be, but someday he will come, and restore the great old days, and remove all cruelty, injustice, and misery. That is the promise.
At this she closed her eyes and smiled, as if remembering. Selden waited a while in silence, then said, "Thank you, Mother Rita. You have been helpful." Heeding Mother Rita's directions, Doris and Harry made their way up an alley. Up ahead, in a rest area, they spotted a group of men, mustaches bristling, bare upper arms muscular and glistening under the yellowish indoor light of the walkway. Clearly, they were waiting for the Outworlders, and almost automatically, Selden and Doris came to a halt. One of the men stepped forward. "I'm Marin. I'm here to tell you that we don't like Outworlders in our district. If you want to leave, you'll have to pay." "We have nothing but credit tiles," Selden said. "You'll have to fight me if you want them." "It would be a shame to hurt you," said Marin. "I'll tell you what, Master. I'll take the girl." "No," said Selden. "Let the woman go. I challenge you to a fight. 1-to-1, you with the knife, me without. If you want bigger odds, I'll fight 2 of you. But let the woman go." "Stop, Harry," cried Doris. "If he wants me, let him come and get me. You stay right where you are, and don't move." "You hear that?" said Marin, grinning broadly. "You stay right where you are, Harry, and don't move. I think the little lady wants me. You two keep him still." Selden's arms were caught in an iron grip, and he felt the sharp point of a knife in his back. Doris called out again, "Don't move, Harry." She turned to face Marin, her half-closed hands poised near her belt. He moved in on her purposefully, and she waited until he had come within arm's length. Suddenly her own arms flashed, and Marin found himself facing 2 large knives. Marin lunged with his knife. Doris' left-hand blade moved flashingly and caught his with a force that pushed his arm aside. Her right-hand blade flashed inward and made a diagonal slit in his T-shirt. A thin, bloody line smeared the dark skin beneath. Selden felt the grip on his arms weaken. He tensed himself. Now Marin lunged again, and again Doris' left-hand blade caught his knife, while her right hand twisted agilely and drew downward, even as Marin's hand closed upon it. His hand closed on nothing but the blade, and when he opened his hand, there was blood on his palm. Selden felt the grip on his arms weaken further. He lifted them suddenly, pushing up and forward, and was free. His 2 captors turned toward him with a sudden shout, but he quickly kneed one in the groin and elbowed the other in the solar plexus, and both went down. Doris shouted, "Just keep them off, Harry. Don't attack yet. As for you, Marin, my next stroke will not be a scratch." Marin, totally enraged, roared incoherently and charged blindly. Doris, dipping and sidestepping, kicked her foot against his right ankle, and down he crashed, his knife flying. She then knelt, placed one blade against the back of his neck and the other against his throat, and said, "Yield." With another yell, Marin struck out against her with one arm, but she was upon him in an instant, hacking away a section of his mustache. When he drew away, it was dripping blood. Doris shouted, "It won't grow again, Marin. Some of the lip went with it. Attack once more, and you're dead." Marin had had enough. He stumbled away, moaning. The other men turned and scurried away. Doris lifted her eyebrows and said to Selden, "This time at least Hammond can't complain that I failed to protect you. I think the news will spread with enormous speed, and we can get out of Billy Bottom without fear of being stopped." She was quite right. Both Harry and Doris had taken lingering baths and had changed their clothing by the time Gerard Tressalver came home that evening. Tressalver said, "I understand there was a knife fight in Billy Bottom, you and Mistress against 100 thugs, and you killed them all." Selden tried to explain what had happened. "We can't have that sort of thing in this house," said Cecilia Tressalver.
On account of you, we have trash from the street standing in the doorway." Tisalver broke in. "What my wife means is that an urchin from Billybottom wishes to see you, and we are not accustomed to that sort of thing in this neighborhood. It undermines our standing." Selden smiled dryly. "Ah, here comes the urchin under discussion. And it's Rach, which somehow doesn't surprise me." Rach entered, looking about, clearly intimidated. As the Tisalvers left and slammed the door behind them, Rach told Harry and Doris that he had followed them from Mother Ritas. "I came to bring you a kind of message from a guy called Devon. He wants to see you. He lives in Billybottom and don't carry no knife. He helps guys there when they get in trouble with the government." "Why does he want to see us?" asked Doris. "Dunno, lady, but he says like this: 'Tell them I want to see the man who talked to a Dalite heat-sinker like he was a human being, and the woman who beat Maron with knives and didn't kill him when she might have done so. Anyway, he's waiting for you." Selden smiled. "Then we'll come with you." He looked at Doris with a trace of doubt in his eyes. "All right, I'm willing," she said. "Perhaps it won't be a trap of some sort. Hope springs eternal." They met the man who called himself Devon in a room behind a dilapidated diner. Rach led the way. Doris observed that the area was deserted. "It's the way Devon likes it," said Rach. "He's always changing around, staying here, there. It's safer for him, from the government." "Why would the government want Devon?" asked Doris. "I don't know, lady." Rach led them on, in silence. Devon looked up when they entered the room, with a wild look that softened when he saw Rach. The boy introduced them, and, grinning, left. "So, you go under your own name," said Devon. "You make no effort to remain undercover. But the Empire wants you, Master Selden. I would urge you to disappear, really disappear. You could be useful to us." "In what way?" asked Selden. "You talk to a young man named Hugo Amaral," said Devon. "He tells me that you can predict the future." Selden sighed. "Either you misunderstood Amaral or Amaral misunderstood me. What I have done with psychohistory is to prove that it may be possible to predict the future, but it may be impossible to find out how to take advantage of that possibility. Do you understand?" Devon looked at Selden darkly, then at Doris. "Then you can't predict the future, but you may be able to learn to predict the future someday. That's why the Empire wants you." "No," Selden raised his finger didactically. "It's my idea that that's why the Empire is not making an overwhelming effort to get me. They know that right now I know nothing, and is therefore not worth upsetting the delicate peace on Trantor by interfering with the local rights of this sector or that. That is the reason I can move about under my own name with reasonable security." Devon gave them a weary look. "Would you, in any case, help us? You see the situation here in Dal. We're oppressed, and from your treatment of Hugo Amaral, I believe you feel sympathy for us." Selden nodded in agreement. Devon's lips tightened. "The Empire encourages this oppression as a matter of principle. Dal has the potential for making serious trouble. If the heat sinker should go on strike, Trantor would experience a severe energy shortage almost at once. However, Dal's own upper classes would spend money to hire the hoodlums of Billybottom and other places to fight the heat sinkers and break the strike. It's happened before. I've been trying for years to build a feeling of solidarity among the peoples of Trantor. But where do we come in?" asked Doris. "For one thing," said Devon, "both of you are scholars. We need people like you among our leaders. Even if you can't actually predict with psychohistorical accuracy, you've studied history. You have a certain feeling for consequences." "I am the historian," Doris said, "and I can tell you that there have been many revolutions in galactic history. But often this has only meant that one ruling class is replaced by another." Devon, listening intently, said, "I'm aware of that. Perhaps we can learn from the past and know better what to avoid." "Even with right on your side," said Doris, "there is nothing your Dalite knife handlers can do as long as there's an army with kinetic, chemical, and neurological weapons, an army willing to use them against your people." "But Trantor is a multi-governmental world," said Devon. "Each sector has its own rulers, and some are anti-imperial. If we can get a strong sector on our side, which you could help us do, We would not then be merely ragamuffins fighting with knives and stones.
I shall assume, said Dors, that you are thinking of the mayor of Y. If the mayor were willing to use popular discontent to improve the chances of toppling the emperor, doesn't it strike you that the end he would have in view would be that of succeeding to the imperial throne?
You mean, said Divan, that any powerful leader who's willing to help us may then betray us. But if we are ready for that, might we not betray him?
It sounds like a recipe for chaos, said Dors.
He will not help us, then?